A lonely farmer thought he had already faced the worst pain life could offer until his black horse returned home one evening with a note tied to its neck, a message that shattered the quiet of his world and forced him to confront a truth he was never ready to face. Before we begin, subscribe, like, and leave a comment to help us bring more emotional stories from the heartland to people who believe in loyalty, courage, and second chances. The sun was already sinking behind the wheat fields when Ethan Crowley heard the familiar rhythm of hooves on the dirt road. It was a sound he knew better than his own heartbeat. Slow, steady, unmistakable. "Shadow!" he called out, wiping his hands on his worn denim jacket. The black horse emerged from the orange haze of dusk, his coat glowing faintly as if it carried the last light of day within it. Shadow had been gone since morning, wandering farther than usual toward the old county road. Ethan had worried, but not enough to saddle up and chase after him. Shadow always came back. This time, something was different. Shadow didn't whinny, didn't trot toward the barn, didn't lower his head for the usual scratch between the ears. He walked straight toward Ethan and stopped. Ethan frowned. "What is it, boy?" Only then did he see it. A piece of folded paper, yellowed and worn, tied carefully to Shadow's leather halter with a thin strip of twine. Ethan's stomach tightened. "No," he whispered. No. Shadow stood perfectly still, dark eyes fixed on Ethan with an intensity that made his chest ache. The horse's breathing was calm, but there was something heavy in his posture, as if he carried a burden far greater than a scrap of paper. Ethan reached out with trembling fingers and untied the note. The paper was warm, as if it had been held for a long time. Ethan unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky but deliberate. "If this horse found you, then I failed to make it home. Please forgive me." The words slammed into Ethan like a physical blow. His knees buckled. He dropped to the dirt, clutching the note in both hands as the world spun violently around him. Shadow stepped forward immediately, lowering his head and pressing it gently against Ethan's shoulder to keep him upright. "No," Ethan whispered hoarsely. "This isn't possible." The note slipped from his fingers and fluttered onto the ground. Shadow nudged it back toward him insistently. Ethan swallowed hard and forced himself to read the rest. "Shadow followed me when I didn't want him to. I tied him back once, but he broke loose. If you're reading this, I'm probably somewhere I shouldn't have gone." Ethan's breath came in short, broken gasps. Somewhere he shouldn't have gone. Images flooded his mind. The abandoned quarry beyond the hills, the old bridge near the ravine, the places he and Shadow avoided since the accident years ago. His hand shook uncontrollably as he finished reading. "Don't blame the horse. He tried to save me." Ethan folded the note slowly, carefully, as if it might fall apart under the weight of what it carried. Tears blurred his vision, streaking down his face before he could stop them. Shadow let out a soft, low nicker, not a call, not a greeting, but a sound filled with sorrow. Ethan wrapped his arms around the horse's neck, pressing his face into the warm black mane. "Who did this?" he whispered. "Who wrote this, Shadow?" He already knew the answer. There was only one person who would have tied a note so carefully. Only one person who knew Shadow well enough to trust him with a message. Lucas Crowley, his younger brother, the man who left town years ago after a fight that ended with words neither of them could take back. Ethan pulled away slowly, wiping his eyes. "Where did you come from?" he asked the horse quietly. "Where did you last see him?" Shadow turned his head toward the distant hills, ears pricking sharply, body tense. The same direction Lucas had taken the day he disappeared. Ethan looked at the fading light over the fields, fear knotting deep in his chest. He wasn't ready to face his past, but Shadow had already chosen for him.
Ethan stood frozen for a long moment, the folded note clenched in his fist, his knuckles white with tension. The farm around him felt suddenly unfamiliar, as if the land itself had shifted beneath his feet. The wind brushed through the wheat fields, whispering like a voice that refused to be ignored. "So what if?" The black horse didn't move, didn't rush him, didn't pull at the halter. He simply stood there, calm and patient, as if he already knew the choice Ethan was about to make. Ethan exhaled slowly. "I told myself I'd never go back there," he murmured. "Not after what happened." Shadow lowered his head slightly, dark eyes steady, unblinking. Ethan wiped his face with the back of his hand and forced himself to stand. His legs still trembled, but they yelled. Barely. If it's alive, Ethan whispered, voice cracking. If there is even a chance. I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't need to. Ethan turned toward the barn and grabbed the old saddle hanging by the door. His hands moved automatically, muscle memory guiding him as secured to Sadov's broad back. The familiar motions grounded him, even as his thoughts spiraled. As he swung up into the saddle, the past came singing. Memories he had buried deep and hoped would stay there. The last time they ridden this road was the night Lucas left. The argument had been brutal. Words sharp enough to scar. Accusations neither of them truly meant, but neither could take back. Lucas had accused Ethan of being afraid to leave the farm, afraid to change, afraid to live. And Ethan had fired back with the cruelest truth he could find. You're used like that, Ed said. Running when things get hard. Lucas hadn't said a word after that. Ed used turned, climbing to his truck, and driven off into the dark. Ethan swallowed hard as Sadov began walking, always crunching softly on the dirt road leading away from the farm. The sky deepened into bruised shells of purple and blue as evening settled in. They passed the old fence line, then the narrow creek where Ethan used to raise Lucas's voice, laughing until they collapsed in the grass. The memory made his chest itch. Why would you come back? Ethan whispered aloud. After all these years. Sadov snorted softly, as if the answer were obvious. The road narrowed as they climbed toward the hills. The air grew cooler, heavier. Trees closed in around them, branches cracking faintly in the breeze. Every sound felt amplified, the rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs, Sadov's steady breathing beneath him. Ethan's heart pounded harder the farther they went. You shouldn't have gone alone, Ethan said quietly, as if Lucas could hear him. You never were good at being careful. Sadov suddenly slowed, ears flicking forward. What is it? Ethan asked. The horse stopped entirely, staring down a narrow trail that veered off the main road, a path half-hidden by overgrowth, barely visible unless you knew it was there. Ethan's breath caught. The quarry. The abandoned stone quarry sat beyond that trail, a place locals avoided. Years ago, a collapse had killed a worker and nearly taken Lucas with him. Ethan had dragged his brother out with his own hands, screaming for help that came too late for someone else. Ethan hadn't been back since. No, he whispered. Not there. Sadov shifted his weight, restless, then took a step toward the trail. Ethan hesitated, fear clawing up his spine. Sadov, that place isn't safe. The horse turned his head slightly, glancing back at Ethan, not impatient, not afraid. Resolute. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief second. He could still hear Lucas laughing that day, brushing dust off his clothes, sighing, you worry too much. Ethan opened his eyes. All right, he said softly. Show me. They followed the narrow path, branches scraping against Ethan's jacket, the ground uneven beneath Sadov's careful steps. The air smelled of damp stone and theirs. As they crested the final rise, the quarry opened before them, a vast, shadow pit filled with jagged rock and the pools of dark water. Ethan's stomach twisted. Lucas, he called, his voice echoing weakly against the stone walls. Lucas, it's me. Only silence answered. Sadov descended slowly, cautiously, always testing each step. Near the bottom, Ethan spotted something that made his heart stood there. Footprints. Fresh. Leading toward the far edge of the quarry. Ethan slid off the saddle, knees weak. It was here, he breathed. It really was here. Sadov moved the head, stopping near a pile of loose rocks by the water's edge. He lowered his head and eyed something half buried in gravel. A jacket. Ethan recognized it instantly. Worn denim, frayed at the cuffs. Lucas' jacket. Ethan picked it up with shaking hands. It was damp and streaked with blood. No, he whispered. His gaze lifted slowly, following the line of disturbed gravel toward the edge of the quarry. A section of the ground had collapsed inward, leaving a jagged drop into darkness below. Ethan staggered back, heart racing. Sadov let out a low, mournful nick. Ethan clenched the jacket to his chest, pain ripping through him. Isolve come after you, he choked. Isolve said he was sorry. The wind rose suddenly, sweeping across the quarry like a breath from the past. Shadow stepped closer to the edge, staring down into the darkness, ears pricked, body tense. Ethan swallowed hard and followed his gaze. There, faint, almost impossible to hear, came a sound from below. A cough. Quick. Human. A tense heart slammed against his ribs. Lucas shouted, voice cracking. The sound came again, clearer this time. Alive. But trapped.
The sound came again, faint, ragged, unmistakably human. Lucas. Ethan shouted, rushing toward the edge before he could stop himself. Shadow snorted sharply and stepped in front of him, blocking the way with his broad chest. The horse planted his hooves firmly, muscles tense, refusing to let Ethan take another reckless step. Ethan froze, chest heaving. He looked down. The ground near the edge of the quarry was fractured, cracked like broken glass. Loose stones shifted under the slightest pressure, threatening to give way into the dark void below. "You're right," Ethan whispered hoarsely, forcing himself to breathe. "I'm not thinking straight." Shadow lowered his head, nudging Ethan's shoulder gently. Not a command, but reassurance. "Slow down. Think." Ethan knelt, peering over the edge carefully. The drop was steep, jagged rock descending into shadow and water far below. His heart pounded as his eyes adjusted. "Lucas," he called again. "Can you hear me?" A pause. Then a weak reply floated up, carried by the cold air. "Ethan?" Ethan's knees nearly gave out. "Yeah," he choked. "It's me. Don't move. I'm here." I slipped." Lucas's voice echoed faintly. "The ground just gave way. I tried to climb out, but my leg—" Ethan's stomach twisted. "Is it broken?" "I don't know," Lucas replied. "I can't put weight on it." Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, guilt crashing over him in waves. Years of silence. Years of anger. And now this. "Hang on," Ethan said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "I'm going to get you out." Shadow let out a low nicker, ears flicking as he scanned the quarry walls. The horse paced a few steps, then stopped near an old metal post half buried in the rock, a remnant from the quarry's working days. Ethan noticed immediately. "A post," he murmured. "Shadow, you brilliant boy." He rushed back toward the saddle, pulling free the rope coil behind it. His hands shook as he tied one end tightly around the metal post, testing it with his weight. It held. Ethan swallowed hard and tossed the other end down into the darkness. "Lucas, I'm lowering a rope. Tie it around your chest if you can." There was a long, terrifying pause. Shadow shifted restlessly, hooves scraping stone. Then Lucas's voice returned, strained but determined. "I've got it." Minutes crawled by as Ethan waited, every second stretching his nerves thinner. He imagined the ground collapsing further. Imagined the rope snapping. Imagined being too late. Again. "Okay," Lucas called weakly. "It's tied." Ethan braced himself, wrapping the rope around his forearm. He leaned back, pulling slowly, carefully, every muscle screaming as the weight on the other end grew heavier. Shadow stepped in beside him without hesitation. The black horse leaned his full weight backward, digging his hooves into the earth, becoming an anchor stronger than any metal post. Ethan felt the rope tighten, not just with Lucas's weight, but with Shadow's strength added to his own. "Good boy," Ethan whispered through clenched teeth. "Don't let go." Inch by inch they pulled. The rope burned Ethan's palms. Sweat stung his eyes. His back screamed in protest. But he didn't stop. "I've got you," he called down. "I won't drop you." Shadow snorted, breath heavy, muscles trembling with effort. Slowly, a shape emerged from the darkness. Lucas's head appeared first, pale, bloodied, eyes wide with disbelief. Ethan's breath caught. "I've got you, little brother." Lucas coughed weakly. I thought I was done." Ethan pulled harder, Shadow straining beside him, until Lucas's shoulders cleared the edge. Ethan lunged forward, grabbing Lucas under the arms and hauling him onto solid ground just as a section of rock crumbled away beneath the rope. They rolled backward together, gasping, hearts pounding. For a moment, no one spoke. Lucas lay on his back, staring at the sky, chest rising and falling in shallow bursts. Ethan knelt beside him, hands hovering, afraid to touch him too roughly. "You're alive," Ethan whispered, tears streaming freely now. "You're really alive." Lucas turned his head slowly, eyes meeting Ethan's. They were filled with pain and something else. Regret. "I'm sorry," Lucas said hoarsely. "I never meant to disappear like that." Ethan shook his head violently. "I don't care. I don't care anymore. You're here. That's all that matters." Shadow stepped closer, lowering his head to sniff Lucas cautiously. The horse let out a soft huff, as if recognizing the man whose scent still lingered on the old jacket. Lucas managed a weak smile. "You kept the horse," he murmured. Ethan laughed through tears. "He kept me?" Lucas's smile faded as he tried to move. A sharp cry escaped his lips. "My leg," he hissed. "It's bad." Ethan examined it carefully, swelling already visible, the angle wrong. "We'll get you help," Ethan said firmly. "But we need to move. This place isn't safe." Shadow snorted sharply again, ears flicking toward the quarry walls. A deep, ominous crack echoed through the pit. Ethan froze. Another section of rock gave way, crashing down into the water below with a thunderous splash. Lucas's eyes widened in fear. "Ethan, we have to get out. Now." Ethan nodded, heart racing. He glanced at Shadow, who stood ready, steady, waiting for direction. "Can you ride?" Ethan asked Lucas quickly. Lucas swallowed. "I'll try." Ethan moved fast, helping Lucas up despite his protest of pain. Shadow lowered himself slightly, calm and patient, allowing Ethan to guide Lucas onto his back. Once Lucas was secure, Ethan grabbed the reins and led Shadow away from the edge, moving as quickly as the terrain allowed. Behind them, the quarry groaned, stone cracking, earth shifting, claiming the place it had already tried to take. They didn't look back. As they reached the trail leading out, Ethan felt his legs go weak with relief. Shadow had carried the note home. Shadow had led him back. And now, Shadow was carrying the brother Ethan thought he'd lost forever. But as they emerged from the quarry and the adrenaline began to fade, a new fear settled into Ethan's chest. Lucas was alive, but badly hurt. And forgiveness, real forgiveness, still waited ahead. The path out of the quarry felt longer than the one that had led them in. Shadow moved carefully, each step deliberate, powerful shoulders rolling beneath the saddle as he carried Lucas's injured weight. The black horse's breath came steady and deep, a stark contrast to the ragged gasp Ethan heard behind him. Lucas clung to the saddle horn, jaw clenched, face pale and slick with sweat. Every jolt sent a tremor through his body. "I'm sorry," Lucas muttered through gritted teeth. "If I'd known it would be this bad." Ethan didn't look back. His hands tightened around the reins. "Don't," he said quietly. "Just save your strength." The trail narrowed as it descended through the trees, roots twisting across the ground like traps. Ethan walked beside Shadow, one hand pressed against the horse's shoulder, feeling the steady strength there. It grounded him, kept him focused. Behind them, the quarry groaned again, a deep, echoing crack that rolled through the hills. Lucas flinched. That place was always a death wish. Ethan swallowed. "I told you that." A silence fell between them, heavy and sharp-edged. They both knew what memory hovered there. The night of the argument. The words. The door slamming. Shadow snorted softly, as if sensing the tension, and slowed his pace even more. Ethan glanced up at the horse's dark ear flicking back toward him, then toward Lucas. "Good boy," Ethan murmured. "You're doing great." Lucas managed a weak chuckle. "You always talk to him like that?" Ethan nodded. "He listens better than most people." Lucas exhaled slowly. Figures. The trail opened onto the old dirt road, leading back toward the farm. Moonlight spilled across it, pale and unforgiving, revealing every rut and stone. Ethan cursed under his breath. This would be the hardest part. "Can you hold on?" Ethan asked, turning slightly. Lucas nodded stiffly. "I don't have much choice." They moved forward again. Halfway down the road, Lucas's breathing changed, faster now, strained. Ethan heard it immediately. "Hey," he said, stopping Shadow. Talk to me? Lucas shook his head. Just hurts more. That's all. Ethan wasn't convinced. He stepped closer, shining his flashlight across Lucas's leg. The swelling had worsened. The skin looked tight, angry. We need to hurry, Ethan said grimly. Lucas laughed weakly. Always a responsible one. Ethan's jaw tightened. Someone had to be... The words slipped out before he stopped him. Lucas went still. Is that what you think? He asked quietly. That I never was? Ethan closed his eyes for a second. I think you ran. Lucas's breath hitched. Not from pain this time. I didn't run, he said hoarsely. I left because staying meant I was suffocating. Ethan snapped his eyes open. You think I wasn't? Lucas laughed bitterly. You had the farm. You had purpose. I had nothing but your shadow. The words hit Ethan harder than he expected. You had a choice. Ethan shot back. You could have stayed. Help me. Lucas's voice broke. You didn't want help. You wanted control. Shadow shifted beneath the tension, hooves scraping the dirt. The horse tossed his head once, a sharp, impatient motion. Enough. Ethan said suddenly, more to himself than to Lucas. This isn't the time. Lucas slumped forward, exhausted. You're right. I'm sorry. They moved on in silence. The farm lights finally appeared in the distance, a warm glow against the dark fields. Ethan felt relief flood his chest so fast it made him dizzy. We're almost home, he said softly. Lucas lifted his head slightly. Home, he echoed. I never thought I'd see it again. Shadow picked up his pace instinctively, sensing the shift. The barn came into view, familiar and solid, a promise of safety. As they reached the yard, Ethan heard a low groan escape Lucas's lips. Hang on, Ethan urged. Just a little longer. They reached the barn, and Ethan helped Lucas down with careful movements, easing him onto a pile of hay. Lucas cried out despite himself, fists clenched. Ethan moved fast, grabbing blankets, wrapping Lucas tightly. I'll call for help, Ethan said. Ambulance. They'll be here soon. Lucas grabbed his arm weakly. Ethan, wait. Ethan froze. Lucas's eyes were glassy, unfocused. If something happens to me, I need you to know I never stopped being your brother. Ethan felt his throat close. Don't talk like that. I mean it, Lucas insisted softly. I read the note back 100 times before tying it to Shadow. I thought if he made it home, maybe you'd forgive me. Ethan's knees weakened. He sank down beside Lucas, gripping his hand tightly. You idiot, he whispered. I forgave you years ago. I just didn't know how to say it. Lucas's lips trembled. Then say it now. Ethan swallowed hard. I'm sorry, he said, voice breaking. For everything. For the words. For letting you go. Lucas closed his eyes, a single tear slipping free. Thank you. Outside, Shadow stood at the barn door, watching them. Silent, steady, the keeper truths neither brother could carry alone. In the distance, sirens began to rise. Ethan looked up, heart pounding with hope and fear intertwined. They'd made it back, but the hardest part still lay ahead.
The ambulance lights washed over the barnyard in slow pulses of red and white, cutting through the early morning fog like a heartbeat refusing to fade. Ethan stood just outside the barn doors, arms wrapped around himself, watching as paramedics carefully lifted Lucas onto a stretcher. Lucas' face was pale, but his eyes were open. That alone felt like a miracle. You did good, one of the medics said quietly as they worked. You got him here in time. Ethan nodded, unable to speak. His throat was tight, chest heavy with the weight of everything that could have gone wrong, and almost that. As they wheeled Lucas toward the ambulance, he reached out quickly. Ethan echoed. Ethan hurried forward, gripping his brother's hand. I'm here. Lucas managed a faint smile. Shadow whispered, Don't forget him. Ethan glanced back toward the barn. The black horse stood just inside the doorway, tall and still, his dark silhouette framed by the dim light inside. His ears were forward, eyes calm but watchful, as if he knew the worst was finally over. "I won't, Ethan promised. I swear." The ambulance doors closed. The sirens faded into the distance. Silence returned. A different kind this time. Ethan remained where he was for a long moment, breathing in the cool morning air, letting the reality settle. Lucas was alive. Yes, but alive. And for the first time in years, the knot in Ethan's chest loosened just enough to let Ope sleeping. He turned back toward the barn. Shadow and moved. Ethan stepped inside, boots crunching softly on the straw. The smell of iron wood wrapped around him, familiar and grounding. He approached the horse slowly, reaching out a hand. Shadow lowered his head, meeting Ethan halfway. Ethan pressed his forehead gently against the horses. His voice broke. You saved him, he whispered. You saved both of us. Shadow exhaled slowly, warm breath washing over Ethan's cheek. In that quiet moment, Ethan understood something he had never fully allowed himself to see. Shadow was used a horse who carried messages. It was a bridge. Between past and present. Between regret and forgiveness. Between the brother Ethan had lost and the one Mick still kept. Days passed. Lucas survived surgery. The doctor said he would be a long recovery, but he would walk again. When Ethan visited him in the hospital, they spoke quietly, not about blame or old arguments, but about small things. Childhood memories. The farm. The horse who refused to give up on either of them. And when Lucas finally came home, leaning heavily on crutches, Shadow was waiting at the fence. The horse stepped forward calmly, lowering his head so Lucas could rest a hand against his neck. Guess you didn't forget me, Lucas said softly. Shadow snorted, as if offended by the idea. Ethan watched them, heart full in a way it hadn't been in years. The farm didn't magically fix itself. There were still bills, still repairs, still long days ahead. But now, Ethan wasn't alone. Lucas helped were cold. Slowly, carefully, and every morning, Shadow stood between them, steady, loyal, patient. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the fields gold, Ethan leaned against the fence beside the horse. He spent years thinking he'd lost everything, he said quietly. Turns out, some things you stay the long way back. Shadow flicked an ear, breathing softly in the fading light. Ethan smiled. Some bonds don't break. They what? They endure. And sometimes, they come back carrying exactly what you need to survive.